Hello, guys.
Evening, sir.
All right. Good to see everyone again. Welcome to our first Photoshop class. All right. So this is the second class. This is the second session, right? So some members of your class would have already gone to the first session, and what I can tell you is that this should be going. It should go pretty quickly and pretty smoothly, and we should be out of here before nightfall. Hopefully this time around, right? Sounds good.
Excellent, sir.
Okay, so we're going to be using the Photoshop application today. So you guys will need to have your Photoshop program ready. We're going to do a little introduction to Photoshop first. I'm going to ask you guys some questions and yeah.
Good afternoon, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Your lab at school is locked. Are you aware of that?
The laptop screen is what?
I said the lab at school is locked.
It is locked. Is it locked for the whole day today? I mean, from you go there, it's been locked.
Yeah. There's no technician here, so.
What time is it? I'm wondering if
you want to go second year room, so.
No, I'm wondering if the lab tech has already left or was it locked for the day? Do you know? Hello? All right, I'm gonna check that out to see what's happening there, right? So today we're going to be doing an exercise in class, and at the end of the class is pretty much when you'll hand in the exercise, and then I grade it, and next week we'll do another exercise, right? So we're having total 5 exercises to do, and that should take us across all of the primary tools that we're going to be using for it should introduce us to all the primary tools that we'll be using for this module, right? And for the rest of your architectural career, right? All right. So I do remember when we first did that on our little class activity that we did first, where we were talking about the different, there we go, we're talking about we had to put our names there and what programs we use and what programs that we are looking forward to, and a couple of us had here that they use Photoshop, right? So some of us use Revit already, right? So some of us use Illustrator already, so that's pretty interesting. I know that Ayana is maybe excited to learn Photoshop, whereas He-Man, is it Hyman or He-Man?
Hyman, sir.
Hyman, right. Hyman, I guess you can maybe help out the class with some of the questions that we're going to be asking about Photoshop. But pretty much a lot of us are really looking forward to learning Photoshop, and that is the first program on our list. All right. So we're going to look a little bit at what Photoshop is and how we use it in architecture, right? And how it's used today. So I want to start off with a picture that I took many years ago. This is Nate. He was what, 4 when I took this picture, and he's like 10 now. I wonder if he knows that I'm still using his image for my DDM classes. I should ask him. But anyway, one of the primary uses of Photoshop is to do image enhancements, right? So I wanted to just throw an early question out to everyone. What do you guys think is the difference between these two images?
One bigger, sir.
That is true. One is bigger.
The one on the right is Photoshop.
The one, but that's exactly what we're trying to define here. What is photoshopped?
Sky.
And there's a difference in the lighting what
Right.
the side as Photoshop.
Cool. So the difference. Well, you have to tell me what is the difference. Getting a bit.
The street, what is that? The light, the GPS rods are removed from the
The
sky.
GPS light is removed, and that
And
is what.
clouds are added.
Right. Clouds are added. Okay.
Sorry, in terms of saturation and contrast and all those stuff, or you just want to know the difference? Like
Just
the
what
sky.
you notice in your opinion.
Oh,
So
Colors
definitely.
added.
What was that?
Colors added to the sky as well. There's blues and there are different gradients in the sky.
All right. Cool.
You remove the path.
All right. Cool. Good eye. And you know the good thing, the interesting thing about this is, though I'm using an example here as from an image, but a lot of the things that we do in architecture are very similar to this. We don't want to have if we were showing something, a concept or maybe an idea for a design that we have, we wouldn't want to be having light wires in our image. We would want to present our image in the best light possible, right? So this represents some of the major things that we do with Photoshop. You know, we replace the sky and we take out things that we don't want, and we enhance the brightness, and we even add more information. Like if you notice with these two images, the one on the left, the original image is perhaps maybe just this big. So there has been a kind of extension of the image this way, right? And we're able to like extend the image. Do you guys remember rule of thirds from last year? From your
Yes, sir.
art, right? So we added some more content to kind of put him on one of those thirds, you know what I mean? So that we have a little bit more space on this side, right? Rule of thirds, there should be one more. There should be like 3, right? So little things like that represent some of the main things that we do with Photoshop, right? Okay. Hang on a second there. Come on. One of my shortcuts is not functioning as it should. Right. Come on. Okay. There we go. There we go. Right. All right. Hang on a minute. Okay, finally. Okay. Another thing that we do is we do montage. So if we look at a shot like even this, where we see two images here, we can see that this image that we have here, we wanted to get a very wide image, but we also wanted to get the sky in the top half and here in the bottom. But then this cell phone, it was very narrow. So at times we're able to select multiple images and then we can merge them together. So you can look at this image that's represented down here. It's really a merger of multiple, images that we kind of stitch together to get one image. And then we added the 3D rendering on top of it. So this is an image montage, which is one of the other things that we do with Photoshop. All right. What about these two images that we see here? Who can tell me the differences between them? Anybody?
Sir, the perspective is different, like the angle.
All right. And which one would you say is a better composition?
I would say A.
Okay, and all right. And I don't know, Crystal, why would you say A? Well, actually, no, you didn't say A, but I'm assuming you're going to say A is a better composition. Why is it that A has a better composition?
Sir, because it's center aligned, like straight.
All right. And that's one of the things about architecture. I don't know if you've ever tried to take a tall building, you look up and it has this very like perspective view. But in architecture, we tend to want our verticals to be aligned well. And this is one of the things, so very simple, but we use with Photoshop. Because it allows us to manipulate images after we have taken the photo, right? So this is another one of the very popular things that we do, especially in architecture as well. But let's take it a step further. Look at these two images here, right? Now, well, some of these will be obvious, but I wanted to use your eagle eyes. What are some of the differences? So let's say it's Tajay Oakley.
Yes, sir.
What are some of the differences? All right, just give me one that we can see with these images.
I mean, it's daylight in picture A and nighttime in picture B. It's also raining.
Say again?
It's also raining.
Okay, it's raining. That one is easy. That's a giveaway. But guess what? It will get harder as we go down. So I don't know. Let's throw this one out to anybody. What's another difference that you notice between these two images? See if you can find them.
There's a light.
All right, there is a light. There's no light here, so yeah, we added a light.
I'm supposed to be done by Friday then.
What was that one, Alyssa?
I've been blessed. Oh, I'm so blessed without a lamp. I'm so blessed.
I don't think that was for us. Anybody else?
You know? I know, right? I've literally been playing. Girl.
Say again?
I was saying that there's puddles on the ground. There's some glass that appears to be puddles on the ground, and there's a tree added, and there's this dark vignette around the whole.
No, wait. We're only taking one. So yeah, all right. Puddles on the ground, but along that same topic, let's take a look here. What do we notice about these puddles?
They have reflections.
Exactamundo. They have reflections because in the original photo they have none. So that would mean that the reflection is something that we had to build in Photoshop, right? All right. All right. Oh geez, there's one that's like super obvious that nobody has said.
You took away the coconut tree leaf or branches.
Not even that, but that's a good one. The
Yeah, I did a man.
Man.
Exactly. There is somebody right here.
Sir,
Yeah.
now that you zoom in, I can see that there are water droplets like on the camera.
That's a good one. Right. Right. So if you look closely, you can see like some water droplets effect here. Right. So I'm glad we're kind of like diagnosing, what's really happening here in the images, in this image, because it's helping us to really see some of the things that we can do with Photoshop. Now, I know that we might look at the image and say, all right, especially that you see the original image beside it, you're like, okay, so the one on the left is definitely fake. But the thing what sells it is, what are you trying to portray, right? Especially in architecture, it's not Hollywood where it has to be believable. I don't know if you guys ever watch a cheap budget Hollywood movie and the things look fake and you're just like, nah, right? But we're not necessarily trying to be Hollywood here. We're trying to communicate something, and the things that we communicate all need to tie together. So, it's nighttime, it's raining. Because it's raining, there are puddles on the ground. Because it's night, there's a light in the sky. All of these things are made for you to communicate a point. And even though it doesn't look ultra realistic, the fact is that it does communicate the direction or the objective of this image, right? And this is try and open. We're going to try and open this image. There we go. So if we take a look on this image here now, and this is the working file for that image, and all of the things that we mentioned a while ago, you can kind of see them coming in. And what we have here on the left is our layers, and with every layer something is added. There's our bush right there. This is the brightness of the person, so the person was a bit darker to represent that it's raining. This is the light that was added. I don't know if you see that light up the top there, right there. This layer was that light. This layer was that light. Then there is this rain texture that was added. So let's turn off that rain texture there now. Then we have the ground being wet, that wet effect there. So turn that off. Then let's turn off that lens flare effect there, right? You can see that being turned off there. I remember which one this one is. This is the person itself. We could turn off the person there. And we also have the lighting effects here. So if I turn that off, there's that. And then we have the sky. So that's the sky. So now we're basically back to the original image that we originally had, right? And we actually cut out the sky out of the original image, so we could and that's the original sky, right? So you can see how and if we bring up what the original image look like, that's the original image. So you can see how we totally remade this image using all of these effects Turn on back the lighting effect. And you can see how all of them basically work together. Let's turn on that effect, turn on this effect. There we go. And this effect here, notice that it takes a little while to enable, because you can see this waiting symbol here because Photoshop is processing. All right. And let's turn on back the cut here. Right. So that is Photoshop in action. And then, I mean, this is like a very basic level. I mean, you can take this concept of putting a photo together to a much higher degree. So right. If we look at this example, I mean, this is a rendering, and this has way more layers, right? And if I start to turn these layers off, right? So we have a tint, and we have the birds, logos of birds, and we have the people, we have some color correction with the lighting, shadow, there goes the boat, the grass, more grass, more grass, more grass, and we have more. All of these are just pictures of grass that's coming together. And then we have some trees. We have the different pictures of different trees. We can turn those off. There we go. We have the shadows. Then we have the light rays that's in the background. I don't know if you can see that subtle, those God rays in the background there. That's turning off. Then we have more trees that's here. I have then we have the water lilies. Here they go there. That's just a photo of a water lily foreground. That's that water lily gone. All the water lilies. More trees. Then we have the water texture. Let's come down some more. All right. So we have the reflection. That reflection in the water there is actually a photo. So it's not actually reflecting what it's showing here. It's just a separate image that's posing as a reflection. You guys can see that? That's pretty cool. And we can continue to turn off more layers. There goes the water texture, the fog in the background, more grass, color correction, and turn off the sky and everything else. And this is what was rendered from the original. Like, this is what came out of the render program, and everything else was added in Photoshop. Everything else. So if I turn on back all of these layers here, we're back to this. That's pretty cool, right, guys?
Yes, sir.
So, you know, we can really do a lot with this, but we are going to start somewhere with the fundamentals of how we do things like this, right? And what we're going to do is, if you go to the class website, there we go. Oops. There we go. If we head over to the class website and we look under the exercise for today, oops. Under digital design media. All right. Right, we can kind of, and if we go down, so we see we're at exercise 1. And this is what we're going to do today, which is our version of that. We're going to replace the sky in this image, and we're going to add an awesome vehicle in this image as well. Now, when you go on the website and you access this, to access the class files, you're going to choose access exercise files, and you're going to get all those photos that we're going to need for the class exercise. All right. Now, how we do things is that we do the exercise in class. I'm going to try as much as possible that we can travel together, but you know, we might do something on screen and it's going to be different for you guys in reality. So, in some cases, I'm going to solve some problems here and now in class because some of us will have those problems, but in others, I'm going to make sure that the tutorial, what we do here, the tutorial is here that we can rewatch again, just in case there are other technical issues, maybe a computer not working or something. But how we do these exercises is we do them in class, we hand them in at the end of class, we have until the end of the day to hand them in. If there is for some reason that you're unable to hand in, what I would say is that when you do hand it in, send it in with a note and we can talk about it. But these this is something that we do in class and you should be able to follow while we are doing, right? All right. Now, computing on a whole is going to be a hybrid online class. When I say hybrid, meaning there are parts of the lecture that are pre-recorded and parts that are live. Like obviously I'm live now, and then you'll be able to watch this recording at the end if you want. But then there are also parts of the tutorial that might be pre-recorded. Maybe I did it before class or some other time, and everything is kind of mixed together. All right. So I'm going to give you guys a minute to get your Photoshops ready. Right, it doesn't matter which version you have, just fire up your Photoshops now. I remember we talked about the setup for the class. So some of us, maybe we're at home and we take over our parents' television in the living room and that's our tutorial screen. Other persons has to use their phone or the tablet. But you know, try to get where you can see what I'm demonstrating on one screen preferably, and then you can follow on the other screen. All right. Now, also, if you are unable, if you're doing this tutorial at a later time or you have some technical issues now, because we won't be able to track back for everyone to follow. When you go to the class website, there is a section called student recordings, and then you would look for your module. So intro to digital design media, and then you look for DDM class recording 2022-23, and then you'll notice that the tutorial segments from the class are also here as well. All right, so this is where you can go and rewatch just maybe the tutorial part, or we usually post the entire class, which automatically includes this part as well, right? So in computing, you guys have a lot of choices in terms of how you consume the content that we're teaching here. All right, you guys with me? Are you ready? Excited?
Sir,
Shop? Yeah.
you can show where you went for the class recordings again, please.
Right. So I went to up the top to class recordings. Yeah, miss it. Big red button at the top of the website, and then you go to your DDM Digital Design Media, and you look for your current year. Right. So of course, this is not a recording of this class because we're having this class now. But what it is it is parts of what we're going to talk about in class. So that in case you miss something, you can just rewind and play again. All right. All right, everybody following?
Yes, we're following.
All right. All right. Alrighty, okay. I'm just getting some other stuff ready. Okay, so we should be following in our own version of Photoshop. All right. Okay, let's go. Okay, guys, so let's take a look on Photoshop. So we're going to open Photoshop now. Now, I'm using version 2020, but it doesn't matter which version you use. Most of the techniques for using the user interface can apply across all versions. All right, so you're going to fire up Photoshop now. So some of you, when you open Photoshop, you will notice that you get a kind of a welcome screen, and sometimes it might carry you directly onto the work page that has your artboard. So it doesn't really matter. If it carries you to a welcome screen, what is really showing you is some of the projects that you were working on. So these are actually some projects that I was working on. You're going to go to create new document. That's located over here. All right, now when you click that, you're going to notice that it comes up with a window. Now this might look different, as I said, depending on which Photoshop version you're using, but you should notice the same ideas here. You should see the name, which is the name of the file, the document type, so that's selecting whether or not it's going to be on paper, it's going to be a web document. You're also going to choose your resolution. Now for our purposes, just getting used to the interface, what we're going to do is we're going to just choose US paper. We're going to leave it on letter size, and we're going to leave everything as default here, and we're going to choose OK. Now when you do that, all right, so who is with us so far? Are you guys have a blank canvas in front of you?
Sir, I'm still kind of looking for the US paper option. I mean, I don't see any option like that.
So I don't see US.
Right. Right. So if you are not seeing it, then come on. When you go to new, some of us, we might need to look up here for print. right? And then when you see print, then you get the option for letter and you see it come up here. But even if you don't get that, basically you just need to enter the width to be 8.5 and the height to be 11, and that's really all there is to it. All right, and the resolution, you want that to be 300. I'm using portrait. I mean, when you choose the letter size US, I mean, it will default to all of this, but you can really just set these manually. All right. Okay.
Sorry, what almost set manually?
The width is 8.5, the height is 11.
Oh.
Right. All right. This is what you might see. Now, the first thing to notice is your Photoshop layout might not look like my layout. And for those of you who maybe are used to a certain version of Photoshop, you might notice that, hey, okay, this other version looks different than what I'm used to. So the first thing that we're going to do is kind of just demystify why they all look different, because at its foundation, all of them are pretty much the same layout. As a matter of fact, Photoshop hasn't really changed for over the last 20 years. It's gotten more fancy and it has a black theme, but the basic ideas are the same, right? You have your major zones. On this side here, we have our panels, and on this side here, we have our tools, and at the top here, it's all the way up here, we have our control panel and our menu, our drop down menus up top. So that's pretty much the three default zones that you get. Now, for some of us who might be saying, whoa, these are a lot of buttons. What do these buttons do? Now, the great thing about this tutorial is that we're going to kind of learn Photoshop in less than an hour, right? So we're not going to learn what every button does, but we're going to learn how to learn what the buttons do. So let's start with a broad brush, right? Now, on this side here, let's think of these tools as our general tools. What do I mean by general tools? Well, think about tools, something like perhaps this. I mean, this is a scissors. We might find this in most our homes. So this is a general tool that that we might have in any typical home. Maybe like a hammer. Give me another general tool. How about I don't know, you could take any one of these. Pliers, screwdrivers. These are all tools that you will see generally around the house. Any typical person would have. Now, the idea is that on this side, you might find that we have some icons here. We may not know what these icons do, but you can feel safe and assured in knowing that they're general icons that's going to be used throughout whatever we're working on in Photoshop. Now on the other side, now what we have over here are specific tools. Now what do I mean by that? Well, tools that you don't normally find in the typical home. For example, this. I mean, it's not a typical knife, it's a surgical knife. You wouldn't find the average Joe using a surgical knife to cut bread or to open a screwdriver. It is very specific. these tools, like what a dentist would use. It's very specific. It's used to clean teeth. It's not a general tool like a hammer that can have multiple purposes, right? You know, maybe this, and we might say, okay, I don't even know what that is. Some of us might say, okay, that's definitely a specific tool used to do something specific, and I have no idea what it is. Now, in this case, this is something that's used to do tattoos, right? So maybe if you're a tattoo artist, you would recognize, hey, I know that that's a tool that you use to do tattoos. But chances are all of us would recognize that that is a scissors. So you can kind of think of these tools, or rather this zone, for the specific tools, right? You use them to do specific things depending on what you want to do. Our analogy, we had a surgical knife, so if we want to perform surgery, well, that tool will be on this side. Maybe we want to build a tattoo design, well, that tool will also be on this side. But maybe you just want to cut a piece of paper, well, you would find that tool on this side. So these are the default setup for the different zones, right? You have the general tools on this side and the specific tools over here. Now the thing is, what you have in the center up top is, think of it as your options that applies to your program, to your entire program. All right, and we're going to look into that. We're going to get a bit more into specifics as we go along. So now that we know what the zones are, what about the zone that's right in front of us? What are we looking on here? Well, this is known as our canvas, right? This is where the magic happens. And you can manipulate your canvas by using the mouse wheel, holding down Alt and using the mouse wheel to zoom, and holding space bar and left clicking to pan. Now in this case, I don't need to pan because I'm seeing all of the paper, but if I zoom in, then I might need to pan around like this. All right, and what I'm doing now, I'm holding space bar and left click, which is normal click. Now once I hold space bar, notice that my cursor changes to the little hand that you see here. So that means I'm now in pan mode. And when I click and hold, I can be able to move this around. So that's pretty much how you get to move around. You're pretty much going to be holding Alt to zoom and holding pan to pan around. All right. Now I also want to highlight this section down here at the bottom of our screens, right? And if we notice down this side, we see a percentage that we can see here. Oops, that's a little big. And the thing is, I know that maybe some of us can't see the percentage symbol there. So if you look here, show you what that looks like. Right down here, where you see this percentage here, that's basically giving us an idea of just how much we're zoomed in or zoomed out. All right. Okay. So, everybody following so far? Any questions? Is what I'm showing you here what you're seeing on your screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, that's good. That is good. All right, cool. So let's continue. That's the percentage there. Additionally, we see some numbers here, and we're going to get into that when we go into the lecture session when we talk about resolution. Now, what I want to highlight to you is that when you zoom, which is holding down Alt and using the mouse wheel, notice you see that percentage changes, right? So this basically tells you what size are you relative to the actual size of the paper, right? Basically telling you how much you're zoomed in and zoom out. Now it does give a little bit more information than that, but we're gonna discover that as we go along. Usually in an application, the bar at the bottom down here normally displays status, things like the amount of RAM, things that have to do with your zoom and your view and all of that stuff. That's normally displayed down the bottom section here. Now what we're going to do now is kind of explore the interface a bit. So I want you guys to follow along as we try to learn a bit more about the interface. Now if you have messed anything up, I want you to now go to or even if you haven't messed anything up or moved anything around, just to make sure we're all starting from zero, I want us to go to Window. This is for everybody, and I want you to go to Workspace, and we're going to go to Reset Essentials, right? And what this is a type of workspace layout for all the icons and all of that. And what it's going to do is reset it to the default, right? So this is the default for my version of Photoshop. Now I want you guys to follow very carefully, because what we're going to do is manipulate the user interface, and while we're doing that, we're going to learn some tips about Photoshop. Now if you look closely on your right hand side, now this side, remember, houses all the specific tools. Now notice you have some tabs here. You can move these tabs around. There are going to be quite a lot of buttons. Now, one of the things that you might notice when I'm pointing out different things here is that when I zoom into the screen, the mouse is offset. So for example, I might be pointing here, but really in real life my mouse pointer is here. But because I'm zoomed into Windows, it does this weird offset thing when you're watching a recording and I zoom in. So even when you're watching this recording and I zoom in, you might notice my mouse is here, but it's highlighting something that's, you know, way over here, right? So you need to watch what is being highlighted and not necessarily where my mouse is whenever I'm zoomed in, when you're watching a recording. All right, you guys got that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, good to go. Remember, houses all the specific tools. Now notice you have some tabs here. You can move these tabs around. There are going to be quite a lot of buttons. If we look down here, we can see all of these buttons and areas to type in, and we might be saying, okay, what in the world are all of these buttons for? Now before we even start to investigate what they're for, what I want you guys to do, I want you guys to follow me, to just kind of get a feel of how this interface interacts. I want you to highlight, let's choose one of the tabs. I'm going to choose color, and I'm going to click left click, which is normal click, and hold on the color button, and I'm going to drag that out like that. I'm going to do the same for swatches. I'm going to drag that out. Now you may not have some of these tabs open, but you will have tabs on this side of your screen. I want you to click and hold and just drag them out. Now I want you to do that to all of them, so things might get a bit crowded, but don't worry about it. I want you to just drag all of these guys out. Here I have, now in some cases you might have a button that's here. When you click it, you might see it expands into a tab. I want you to drag that out as well. Alright, now when you drag them out, I want you to drag them out as individual windows. So some of them might tend to join up with other windows, but I want you to drag them out as individual windows. See, I have a learn tab here. I'm going to drag that out, make that by itself, and I have a libraries tab. So pretty much I have now disengaged all of these tabs, and they're all floating in the middle of the screen. Now the reason I ask you to do that is I want you to notice how all of these tools are pretty much flexible. Now remember, we took all of these from the right hand side, which houses the specific tools. I remember we discussed specific tools before. There are tools that has a primary purpose. So things like what the dentist would use, and things like what you would use for a surgery, right? Things that you would use to do specific things like do a tattoo. So all of these examples here are examples of these windows that we have just dragged out, and each of these windows does a specific thing. You notice they all have different options, varying buttons and all of that. And don't worry about them too much because we won't be using every one of them. But think of this as if you were a surgeon and you are now coming into Photoshop to do a surgery. Well, you would look for all the tools that has the features that you want. So maybe you will have a scaffold tool, maybe you have some kind of cutting saw, maybe you have some kind of swab. You know, you would drag out all of the specific tools that is necessary for you to perform your surgery, using that as an analogy. So that's all these panels are, and that's what Photoshop calls them, titles them. They are panels, and there are many panels in Photoshop, definitely more than 50 panels. These are only some of the panels that starts up with Photoshop. Now, to kind of get the feel so that we can know what these panels do, I want to highlight some aspects for you. So first, let's close all of these panels that we have dragged out. And if you notice on each panel, there is an X, there is a little double arrow symbol, and there is also the name, right? So these, and there is also a menu button here. So every panel has these 4 elements. For now, I want us to close out these panels, so we're going to be clicking on the X, and we're going to be closing these guys out like that. All right. All right, great. Now, if your Photoshop had opened looking like this, you would be like, wait a minute, where are all the tools, right? But now you've discovered that, well, on the left side, it's general tools. I still don't necessarily know what these buttons do, but I know they are like the hammer, the saw, the screwdriver. And what was on the right side were specific tools that are used to do specific things. They're more precise. And I realized that I could drag them out and close them. Now you might be saying, okay, how do I go about opening back these specific tools? Now the specific tool that we're going to be using for this exercise, we're going to be using the color panel. And to open the color panel and all panels, you're going to go up to the window menu. And when you look in this list here now, this list is actually a listing of all the panels available to us in Photoshop. So I want us to go ahead and open the color panel by clicking that. And you're going to notice that the panel comes up. Now this is one of the panels that we had open originally. and we had closed them, and to open the panel we would go here. Now there are many panels here. Some of them I've never even used before, but each of these panels, as I said, think of them as specific tools: the scaffold, the welding rod, the surgery tool, the dentist tool. That's what these are, right? And if you do particular types of work in Photoshop, then you might be used to your particular tools. So anyway, we have opened the color tool, and that's why you can notice that there's a little tick beside it. So that's how you know that the color tool is open. Now when we open the color tool, I want us just to understand how panels work. So before, remember we said that we realized that the panel has a title. You're able to close the panel, you can minimize the panel, and then each panel has their own panel options, right? Now the actual panel now is where the meat of the matter is for this particular tool. So for example, if we took up that tool that the tattoo artist uses, well, all of the buttons and knobs located on his tool will be located in this space here, right? And in this case, this panel is called the color panel, and it has its features. And what it does, it allows you to change the color of whatever you're working on. Now, I can resize that tool, make it smaller, and I can also minimize it. Now when I minimize it, it turns into a little button that I can expand. When I click it, it expands again, and I can even minimize it all the way down to an actual icon. All right, let's maximize that again. All right, great. So now we understand how panels work. Now I want us to open another panel. Let's go to Window, and we're going to open the layers panel. That's what layers look like there. I also want you to open, let's go again, we want you to open the history panel, and let's go again and open the swatches panel. Now if you had pulled apart your panels earlier, then when you open them back they will still be apart. Alright, so some of you might open panels and they might be together like this, where you see swatches and history together. Well, you just need to pull them apart. Now the idea is that these are the panels we want to use to do this activity. So we're only going to use these for now. Now I want us to arrange it in a particular way, right? Let's give you a recommended way. So layers are going to show you lists of layers here, so you're probably going to want this panel to be long. As a matter of fact, I want us to just dock them side by side, so I'm just going to dock this here, I'm going to dock that there, and I'm going to dock swatches there. So now I have my own little custom panel dock right here, and what I want us to do is we're going to go to Window, Workspace, and we're going to go to New Workspace, and we're going to call this DDM. At least that's what I'm going to call it. So now when I come back to my Photoshop, if somebody else was using my computer, and this was common in the computer labs, you might be used to your panels a certain way, and then you come back and then it's all over the place. Well, you can just go back and load your workspace settings right here. Right here it is, DDM. Okay, great. So now we kind of understand a little bit of where things are zoned and how to manipulate panels. Now I wanted to share some basic fundamentals of Photoshop, right? And in doing so, these are the main panels that we're going to use. Now, up until this point, I expect everybody to have a page open. That's going to be letter size.
Excuse
and
me,
they
sir.
should have these.
Sir, I didn't see how you got all of them on the same thing. I
Oh,
just
well,
think when it happened.
right. Well, once you have them in the same vicinity, so let's say for example you have your layers panel. If I have a channels panel, once it's close by, you can see that blue line. That is how they get attached, so they get docked.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. You need to ask questions, man. All right. So at this point, we should all have this our screen kind of set up like this, where we have our panel here, and we have layers, color, history, and swatches. All right, so that's the panels that we're going to use. All right, so we're going to continue. All right, guys.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to tackle the main exercise, and in doing so we're going to learn how to use Photoshop at the same time. Now let's head over to the now when you do this you all right, so okay, so now we're going to tackle the main exercise, and in doing so we're going to learn how to use Photoshop at the same time. Now let's head over to the class website, and when you head over to the website you're going to head to exercise 1. You're going to see the handout open, and exercise 1 is going to be all about enhancing environment and entourage. We're going to learn how to do a background sky replacement, and we're going to learn how to create depth and motion effects using Photoshop filters, right? So in a nutshell, what we're going to do is combine these 3 images together. We're going to take this shot of Kingston. We're going to replace the sky with a sky selection of your choice, and then we're going to place a vehicle in the scene, and the vehicle is also of your choice. Now notice that you have access to the exercise files here, and to give you an idea of what this project will look like, it is going to look something like this. So there's an entirely new sky that is now here. We have the vehicle here, and we have some interesting motion effects here. We even have some reflection going on here. So this is the kind of thing that you would use Photoshop to do. All right, so let's get going. So we're gonna have Photoshop open. Now I want you guys to follow along as we go, and if for any reason you can't follow along, you can always just pause the video, right? Okay, so what we want to first look on is how we open files in Photoshop. Now if we, for example, download the exercise files, so if we go to the site here and we go to exercise files, it will take us to the folder that has the files that we need. Now this is the background image that we need to use, and these files here are optional skies that we can use, and here are optional vehicles that we can use as well in the scene. It's up to you. So the first thing we're going to do is download these files. Now once the files are downloaded, you will know that you will see that they pop up in the location that you have downloaded them to. So in my case, I have these files here. Now I want to talk a little bit about opening files in Photoshop. Now you could drag the file into Photoshop, that's one popular way, and release. That is what would happen there. Now I'm gonna hit cancel, because that's not how I would necessarily want you guys to practice to open Photoshop files. The proper way that I would want you to do it is you would go to File, then you would go to Place Linked. Some of you might be using a version of Photoshop that just has the word place and not place linked. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to click place linked. Then it's going to ask me to browse for the file. So in this case, I'm going to go to the location of my files, which is here, and I'm going to click this, and then it will be placed. Now you realize that this does the same thing as dragging, so it's up to you which method you want to use. You could either just drag it or you could place linked, right? Now notice when you do that, you will get a message up here that says basically to commit or to cancel what you've just did. So what we're going to do is commit, and that's it. Now notice that we have the image on our canvas. Now remember, we spoke about the general tools that's located over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drag this out just like how we dragged out the other tools. And to get a bit more to arrange this in a nicer way, I'm going to click this expand button here to expand the tool like that. This is just a personal preference because I like to see the tools together like this. Now each of these tools have particular purposes, and when you hover over them, they will actually give you a quick synopsis of what they do. Now at least for the 2020 version, so it might not do for your version. It also tells you the shortcut of the tool. Alright, so I'm going to now place another image here, which is the sky. Now the last time I used the place linked command, this time I'm going to use a drag and drop command. So here is my folder here, and let's say I'm going to use this sky. I'm going to drag it and release, and I'm going to commit that change. So now I have two images. Now in order to move my images around, I need to be on the move tool, which is located here. That's my move tool. Alright, so I'm going to make sure my move tool is activated, and notice that I can move this around, and I can also move this other layer around. Now if I try to click this, it's really not clicking. It's still giving me the top layer, and the reason for that is because I am now locked to this layer here. So now I'm not able to just select it directly. Now in Photoshop, I want you to notice what happens on this side of my screen, which is here. This image is on that layer, and this image is on that layer. Now remember, this is our layers panel, right? Remember we spoke about panels, which are the specific tools. And this is exactly what the layers panel does. It helps to keep our content organized. Now, you can clearly see that there is actually a highlight around this layer here. So that is how you know that this layer is the active layer. And naturally so, when I try to move it around, I'm only able to move this active layer. I'm not able to click on this layer behind here. Now to change the active layer, what I would need to do is I would need to now highlight this layer below. Now notice when I do that, you can see how the highlight box switches between them. Now, depending on your version of Photoshop, you might not.
I cannot see my picture.
The picture that you dragged into Photoshop?
Yes, sir. It's like completely blank. I can only see the outline.
Okay, let's see. Oh, but it's, well, what you can do is you can share your screen. You want to share your screen? Show me what you're seeing.
No, sir. I was suffering silence.
You what? What happened?
I was suffering silence, sir.
All right. Because it could be that it's on another layer. The layer is off.
No, sir. It's on. I dragged it and it's just blank. I only see the outline.
Okay. If you're only seeing the outline, when you dragged it in, did you tick the box at the top? For yes?
What box?
Okay, because remember, let's say that you have the, close this like that. All right, and all right. So let's say that when you have your images and you drag in your image, so let's say it's this image. When you drag it on the artboard, not up here, but then it's going to open in a new file. So when you release it here, you're saying that you're only seeing a blank X. That's what you're seeing?
Yes, sir.
You get this little tick up here?
I can't really see because the quality is blurry.
Oh, right. Okay, no problem. Right. So are you getting, did you get this tick up here?
I don't see that.
When you're dragging the image, you should get a tick.
Sir, never mind. Just continue the class. I'll go start over.
All right, because guess what? The problem you're having, other people might have it too. But thank goodness that you decided to the problem. So you would have solved the problem for everybody. Trust me, I went through the same thing in the first session. It is expected that you won't see everything 100% as identical to what I am doing.
Sir?
So, yeah?
I'm actually glad that she paused it because I'm here trying to hurry up and download the pictures, and then the video was just going, and I was like, geez, because so I'm happy I got the time to work on downloading the pictures properly. and saving them. So
See?
thank you, Monty.
Yes, see? So, I mean, if you're getting an X here, it could be that it's just a graphical thing. And as soon as you tick the tick at the top, then it would clear up. So do you see that tick at the top? When you after you drag in your image?
Sir, please continue with the class.
All right, no problem. So let's continue. But let's find out where everybody else is at. Are you guys able to drag in the image like what I did?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else having any challenges with getting their image in?
Well, sir, I was caught up to the point where I was supposed to input the second image and then I don't know, it freeze and then I have to start over, I look like. So I'll just wait out like Shante.
Yeah, that's perfect. As I said, these things happen while you're trying to do the thing. But don't worry. The recording is there, but guess what? You can't ask the recording questions, right? When something is not happening for you.
Sir, you'll never believe what just happened.
Okay.
I started over and now I'm seeing the ticky.
Okay, well, maybe you just needed a good old restart for it to work, huh?
Sir, a quick question.
Yeah.
So I got in the first image, but now it's saying to drag the next image that the scratch disk is full.
Ah, yes. So that would mean that you are running out of hard drive space, right? Because
Yes,
what
sir.
happened, Photoshop, remember we were doing that thing last week with how the programs use different aspects of the computer. Photoshop doesn't use your RAM. What it uses is your storage, right? That's how it. So you need a lot of storage. You need enough storage. Let's not say a lot, but you need enough storage when you're using Photoshop. So it's the speed of your storage and the amount of storage, right? Remember this guy here? Right? And we spoke about this. So this is why the storage size is important to Photoshop, because it uses the storage as what's called a scratch disk. It's kind of like a temporary look. It's kind of like how memory works. Like imagine, remember we talked about the table, and the table represents your RAM, and anytime you open a program, it opens something on your table. Well, Photoshop doesn't even use a table, it uses a shelf. It has like its own shelf, like it requires a shelf. Because whatever your table will never be enough, put it that way. So long and short is that Photoshop does require a certain amount of disk storage. Now how you can solve this is, if you follow along with me, what you would do, you'd go to edit, and then you would go to preferences, head down to preferences, come on preferences, oh I need to tick this first. So head to edit, then head to preferences, then go over to scratch disks. And you're going to see this window opens up, and it's going to tell you that, okay, these are the drives in your computer. And for me, it is using the D drive as a scratch disk, which is basically as a temporary holding point for whatever I'm working on. So if you have more than one drives, or I think even an external hard drive, you can tick another drive if the one that you have working primarily is filled.
I only have one. And press C1.
Exactly, yeah. So don't feel no way, that's what most of us have. So that just means that you need to, like, I don't know, empty your recycle bin, see if you can get back some space.
Okay.
Another hot tip that you can use in case other persons are running out of space, if you hold on Windows key and press R, you will see this run dialog box comes up, and then you type %, temp.
Type what, sir?
%, temp, %. So that's percentage, TEMP, percentage, and you press OK. And then what that will do, it's going to open up a folder. And this folder for me has all of these stuff here, they can be deleted. These are all temporary files. So for example, I have a temporary file here. See, Photoshop temp is using 8 gigs. That's like insane, right? So you can just, when this folder opens up, you can just Control A to select everything, and you can hold Shift and press delete. All right, and then if you want to ask if you want to delete all these things. Now, when you delete all of these things, it's going to tell you that some of them can't be deleted. So see, I have like 30 odd gigs of temporary stuff that can be deleted. It's not going to delete everything because it's going to pause at some point and say, hey, this file is in use or whatever. It's okay, you can just skip that file. But right now, so you see it's telling me that this can delete, so I'm going to skip this file. And I'm going to tick this and choose skip. So now I have freed up, in my case, I've freed up like 30 odd gigs of space. So in your case, it might not be so much. Your temporary files might be, 10 megabytes or it might be 10 gigs. But that is a real quick way that you can delete files that is not in use manually. I'm sure there's like an automatic way to do it in Windows, but that's how you can do it. All right.
Yes, sir.
I hope that helps.
19. Okay, hold on. It says completed.
But that's what scratch disks are. They're like memory for Photoshop. All right. Let's continue.
No. Still full. So.
Still full? Oh man, I don't know. You have to delete stuff. You have to delete some stuff. Find some stuff somewhere that you're not using anymore. See if you can delete them.
Sir, the Photoshop. You can hear me, sir?
Yeah, man, I can hear you.
The Photoshop look like it yamming up my laptop because your voice is coming before your mouth is moving.
No, that's not Photoshop. That is just Zoom and the setup that I have. I need to somehow solve that problem. It seems to be okay in the recording after you watch it, but during Zoom, I don't know. It's not in sync. Anyway, one of these days I'll figure it out.
That's tricky.
But it's not Photoshop. All right, let's continue. Have that highlight box. Doesn't matter. Once this layer is activated, now if I try and move, it moves the layer below. And if I try and move the top layer, well, same thing. I'm unable to select it because I have already highlighted this layer here. And I know that it's highlighted because it has this darker color that is there. Alright, great. So now that I have these two layers arranged, you might be wondering, well, but suppose I had carried in my sky first and I wanted the sky to be behind the building. Well, how you do that is you actually just rearrange the layers. How it is now, we have the sky layer, and then below the sky layer we have the downtown Kingston layer. Below that layer we have our background, which is white, and you can see it represented in the images here, right? We can clearly see that the downtown image is on that layer and it is below the sky layer, which is here. So right away you realize that if I wanted to put the downtown layer above, I would need to swap these two layers around, and to do that all I need to do is to click and hold and drag, and notice you get that little blue line there to tell you that it's now there. So now this layer is on top, and you are now able to see how you manipulate the layers. Now for our purposes, we want the sky layer to be on top, and also we want to call it something that we can recognize. So we're going to double click on the name and type sky. There we go. So now we can see that it's called sky, and we have a downtown layer that is here. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to start to manipulate the sky layer in the background. So I'm going to actually turn off my sky, my sunset sky, by clicking this little eyeball there. So now it's turned off. It's still there, but it's just off. Alright, great. So we have our sky there. Next, what we're going to do is kind of crop this so that it matches with our image. So to do that, we're going to head over to our general tools, and we're going to use the crop icon, which is here. Now crop is a general tool. Pretty much most programs have a crop tool, and we're going to click it like that. And once we click it, notice that we have these highlights here. Now before we start to move this, I want you to start to notice that any tool that you click on in this window here, whichever one is activated, it shows properties for those tools at the top. So now that my crop tool is highlighted, I'm seeing options here that has to do with my crop tool. If for example I highlighted my move tool, then notice that the options up here change to options for move, and so forth for all these different tools. Every time I switch to a different tool, the option at the top changes. So anyway, I'm going to choose my crop tool, and what I'm going to do is just to drag in these areas here, and then I'm going to commit those changes by clicking the yes like that. Okay, so I'm going to click that. Good. So now it is there. So I'm going to zoom in now by holding Control and mouse wheel. Now notice I can zoom all the way in, and if you continue to zoom in, you will notice that Photoshop starts to put these little squares, and these squares are actually pixels, which you can see is what ultimately makes up an image. When you're this close, they look quite blocky and horrible, but the more you zoom out, you realize that, hey, these squares eventually come together to show you that image, right? That is pretty cool. Now, the first thing we want to do with our image now is we definitely want to remove this sky so that we can put the other sky there. So the first thing we want to do is to manipulate this layer. Now you need to select the layer that you're currently manipulating. Right now we have the sky layer active, and we know it's active because we can see this brown area there. And the idea is that we don't want it to be the active layer. So we're going to click the downtown layer. Now this layer is active. Good. So now before we can start to cut this layer using one of our tools, we need to change this layer to a particular layer type. Now you notice on each layer there are these little symbols that's located here. So on this downtown layer I have a little symbol there, and on the sky layer I have a little symbol there, right? And these symbols tell you the type of layers that they are. Now by default, whenever you carry an image into Photoshop, it by default makes it into what's called a smart layer, and it does that by default, and we're going to see why it does that as we go further into the tutorial. But this is how you know that these layers are smart layers, right? Now the thing about smart layers is that you can't edit them. So if we wanted to cut the sky using one of our tools, in this case we're gonna choose the right, so we're going to use this tool here, and this tool will allow us to cut out the sky. Now this tool here is called our lasso tool, and I want you to notice something important about these tools. Now for each of these tools, you notice that there's a little kind of a triangular icon right there. You can kind of see it again here, and you can see it also on the lasso tool, right? So think of a lasso tool as a way to select something, right? And we use the lasso tool to select an area that we want to manipulate or delete or change in some way. Now these little triangle here tells you had a question?
Oh, sir, something went horribly wrong when I tried to crop the photo. I'm not sure how to fix it. So.
Okay, no problem. There is always undo, which is Control Z. So can you undo?
I'm going to try.
Right. See if you can undo.
Sir, I also have a question.
Yeah.
Do we have to follow the steps step by step, or it doesn't matter? Because I didn't drag the second image. I did the link thing again.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So you can undo. One thing to remember though, when you are using Photoshop and you use a crop tool, that's this tool right there. There's this option up top that's based on the tool that says delete cropped pixels, and what that simply is doing is, well, when you crop something out, it just gets rid of it. But I normally leave this off so I don't tick it, so that if I crop, dragging down, and when you're cropping, I would use these handles here. So I would drag that down like that. And if I crop it in like that and choose OK, when I go back to the crop tool, the rest of the image is still there. So that's what happens when I do not check this box. Right? So You know, just don't check this. I think it's off by default. If it's on, then I would turn it off. You know? And when you do that, that should allow you to be everything to be all propped up. Yeah. All right. Plus that there are other types of lasso tool, and to access them what we do is click and hold. So if you click and hold, you will see, and I'm left clicking and holding, you will see that you have a regular lasso tool, a polygonal lasso tool, and a magnetic lasso tool, right? And the interesting thing about this is that you can see that this lasso tool is the one that is currently in use, which is the polygonal lasso tool, and you know that because it has that little highlight right there. Great. So we're on the lasso tool now. Now basically what we want to do is try to cut out particular elements of the tool, but if we try to click here, it will not allow us to cut the tool. We have to do what's called rasterizing the layer. The reason for that is that you're not able to edit images that you directly carry into Photoshop, and you can think of this as a kind of safety precaution. When you place an image in Photoshop and it gives it the smart layer, it's kind of a safety net that protects this image from being manipulated. Now, to allow this image to be manipulated, you need to right click on the layer. So make sure the layer is highlighted first, and you're going to right click and you're going to choose rasterize layer. Now when you choose that, notice that the icon is now gone, and now you can make edits to the layer. So now you have to be cautious, because any changes you make now will actually edit the image. Now I could try out this first lasso tool here, right? And your mileage might vary, but I guarantee most of us will not choose this tool. Let's try it out first. We can always undo. So if we wanted to use this lasso tool now, we will have to now drag and try and manually cut this thing out. And you can see I'm using the mouse to do this, and that's really not gonna work. Wow. I mean, this is a horrible cut, but I'm still gonna try to use this lasso tool. Alright, great. I'm gonna come all the way back here and all the way down, and when I get to here, I'm gonna just release. Now once I release, notice I get this is called your marching ants, and it kind of looks like marching ants. You can kind of see them there, and this is telling you that I have used the lasso tool to select the image like this. Now if you tried out this lasso tool, you'd realize that it's quite difficult to try and select the sky, especially using a mouse. So this isn't going to work. So to change this, I can now undo. Now in Photoshop, to undo, you use another panel called the history panel. That's here. So far we've been using the layers panel. So let's see what the history panel does. So the history panel gives us a track of all of the changes that we have made thus far. So you realize that the last thing we did was to rasterize the layer, then we used the lasso tool. So we're just going to go up by one by clicking on it, and there it is. It basically undid what we just did. Alright, great. So this time we're going to try out a different lasso tool. So I'm going to select this, and we're going to use the polygonal lasso tool. Alright, so let's give this another swing. Now the polygonal lasso tool, it does what it says. It's kind of like a polygon. So this isn't so bad. This is actually great. Now when you're using this tool, you might realize, oh, I really need to zoom in here. And if you try to use the mouse wheel, it doesn't zoom. even for some of the versions of Photoshop, if you hold Alt and mouse wheel, it will zoom, but some versions might not zoom. So what you would use is the plus and minus key. So I'm going to use the plus key here. Now you realize that you can actually go right in now, and this polygonal lasso tool gives you a nice kind of angular cut, which is great. So now I can really zoom in and try and cut these elements out, right? Now this is great when cutting straight edges like buildings, because I can simply, I'm going to do a rough kind of cut here now, but I can simply use this to gauge the edges of buildings. However, when it comes to cutting foliage, that's another story, because now if I wanted to cut this out, I would have to, you know, click all of these angles here, and it gets a little crazy. So I'm going to cancel that by pressing escape. Let's try out another lasso tool here. And the reason I'm showing you these is because these are going to become very important. This is how you put context in your architectural drawings. You might want to insert a car or cut out a tree. Chances are you're going to be using one of these tools. So let's try the magnetic lasso tool. Let's see what that does. Now to give that a good swing, I'm going to go to the side of the building here, and I'm going to click and release once. I'm not holding down on the button. I'll just click and release to activate it. Now while I'm moving the mouse, this is actually automatically detecting the edges of these structures here, and I can still zoom in. And what it's doing is actually trying to detect the edges. Now I'm not clicking, I'm just actually moving the mouse, and Photoshop is trying to say, okay, I think the edge is there. So you can imagine this can kind of make this process a bit quicker. Oh, if you accidentally highlight an edge that you don't want, you're going to press backspace. Backspace is kind of like undo for doing lasso tool selections. There we go. And I can really just quickly highlight a section here like that. Let's zoom out a bit. And I would come all the way back around and where I started, and notice that I get a little plus, a little circle there. I'm going to click, and then it's closed, and now it's highlighted. So that is another way you can use to select. Now the truth is that when you need to cut out elements, the ultimate way to do that is to actually use all, if not most, methods, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, okay, I'm going to first use the polygonal lasso tool. This is my favorite tool. And the first thing I'm going to do is to try and cut these mountains first. I'm not going to try to cut everything in one. I'm going to try and cut the mountains first. So here I go. And I'm going to zoom in, right? Now remember, the polygonal lasso tool, you have to click to confirm the positions. There we go. Now you might say, well, maybe I want to use the magnetic lasso tool. There are actually other tools you could use, but for this purpose, we're just going to cut these out using these tools. Now I know it might seem a bit daunting at first, and you can hear the amount of times my mouse is clicking, but you really get used to it after a while. And what I'm doing here, I'm using the plus and minus keys to zoom in, zoom out to see where I am, and to zoom in again. Now this is the trick. I'm not going to try to make one cut and cut everything. Nope. What I'm going to do is I'm only going to cut certain parts. So when I reach near to the edge of the mountain, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to go straight up, come around, back down, and then find back where I started. And I can know that because you see the little circle there. And that is now selected. Now when this area is selected, you'll know it has the marching ants. You'll see it around it. Now, obviously, we haven't finished cutting out the rest of the building, but my suggestion is not to try and cut everything in one go. So I'm going to cut up to this point here. I'm going to ensure that on my layers tab, I am on the correct layer, which is supposed to be the downtown layer. And then I'm going to hit the delete key. And then that's going to delete the sky there. All right, great. So now it's deleted. Now I still have the selection here. So to deselect, I'm going to right click and hit deselect. All right, great. So now I need to continue my journey, cutting out the rest of these elements here. So you might want to choose what tool you want to use. I'm going to continue with the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to continue cutting these guys here. All right. Now I know that this part gets a little bit time consuming, right? Has anybody started to cut out their model?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm gonna give you a little time, maybe like 5 minutes or so, so that you can start to cut these elements out. So that we can have enough time to follow along in the last part of our tutorial today. All right. So let's see. I want you guys to go and start cutting now. Give me a little time. All right. So most of us, hopefully, have reached somewhere with tracing. I know that some of us probably get stuck in the areas with the trees. Right? Anybody having fun cutting out those areas with the leaves and stuff? Oh, having too much fun, maybe? Or are you guys alive?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, okay. Um, I see that we got through the recipe a bit.
Excuse me, sir. When we're seeing the ants, we just press delete, right?
Right, but make sure that your layer is rasterized, or else you get an error message. Remember
Okay,
that?
sir. Yes, sir.
Right. All right. Remember, these videos are. Notice that I'm doing it piece by piece. So I'm deleting. I'm not trying to make one go to delete everything, to cut out everything, but that would just be really risky. All right. All right. Here. So I'm gonna just use my lasso tool and select in here and hit delete. There we go. All right, so we just have this section that is left, so I'm gonna go ahead and start cutting this out. Now the more you do this is the more you will get used to it, so it might not be as quick for you as it is for me, but that's okay. We all need to start somewhere. I'm gonna grab this Polaris. I'm gonna go all the way around. So this is the process that persons will use to cut things out of objects in Photoshop. There we go. Now things get a little funny with this section here because this is all organic elements. As a matter of fact, I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to cache that in. So I'm going to go all the way around and double click and delete. Now for organic elements like these trees here, you could, I would rather use the regular lasso tool because when I'm trying to draw this, my mouse is not going to be straight, but that's great because these things here should be organic. So I'm going to try and do this to the best of my ability here. There we go. And I'm going to come all the way back around and release. I'm going to hit delete to delete that section. So this is okay, but obviously this is not, so I probably want to switch back to my polygonal lasso tool now to grab this section. There you go. I'm going to hit delete. Alright, so that only leaves me with this section here, so I'm going to just cut along here. Let's zoom in a bit. Now you can also pan while you're using the tool by holding the space bar. So notice the concept of how we did this. What we did was we got rid of section by section. Now if I turn off my background layer, notice I will get these checker boxes, which basically represents that the background is transparent. And this is great because now I can turn on my sky layer and I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to use my move tool, and of course I can move it around, but of course the sky layer is in front and I want it to be behind. And remember how this works. Currently this layer is on top. Ideally I want this layer to be below my downtown layer because I want it to show up behind the areas that I cut out. So to do that, I'm going to just drag this down. There we go. Then I'm going to use the move tool and kind of position this so that it's a bit nicer. It is a bit small, so what I want to do is I want to scale this up. Now to scale this up, you should be able to see these control boxes here, but in case you're using a Photoshop that you don't see these boxes, you need to enable it. And if you remember how this works, remember whatever tool you select, the properties for those tools are located up here. So with the move tool selected, you want to select this tool that says show transform controls, and what that does is it turns on these guys here so you can see them. Mine is enabled by default, but yours might not be. So I'm gonna make sure that is there, and then that will allow me to resize this. So I'm gonna actually make this larger. And you don't want to skew the image. So if you're using an old version of Photoshop, you need to hold shift so you don't skew the image. Alright, great. So I'm gonna position this so that it's like maybe like right there. That looks pretty good. Alright, and I'm gonna commit that by clicking the tick up here. Alright, so I've now done a sky replacement here, and that takes care of this section. Now would be a good point to save, so I'm gonna hit save. Okay guys, so all right, now for the final piece in our tutorial. So how are you guys finding it so far?
Sir, I don't remember which tool him say I must click to what am I saying? What is you? I don't remember which tool you say I'm supposed to click so it can get bigger. So the image can get bigger.
So it can get what?
Bigger, the image of the sky.
Hold on. When you mean to zoom in?
No, as in to extend the image.
Hold on, let me see what. So for example, when you say to extend the image, what do you mean?
You know, like how you make a picture bigger, you carry up before corners.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, so in order for you to get these little markers to make it bigger, when you click on the move tool, so this is the move tool here, at the top you want to ensure that you check this thing that says show transform controls. So that is, but you have to be on the move tool in order to get that, and then that is what enable you to just make it bigger.
Okay, sir.
Right. Okay. Alrighty. All right.
Sir?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You hear me clearly?
Yeah, man, I'm hearing you.
Alright, sir, I'll miss out on
Hold on. You gone now.
You hear me now, sir?
Yeah, hearing you now. Hold that position.
Yeah, I'm saying. Yeah. Whoa. Anyway, I was saying, sir, I miss I miss when you use the sky onto the background. I can go over that one too.
You miss when I change the sky?
Yeah.
Right. So all that really happens is that when you cut out that layer, so like for example, if I'm looking at this this image that I have here, there we go. Right. So if I'm looking at this image that I have here, right, and let's rasterize it like that, and let's say that I'm only going to do just a part of this, just to kind of do a quick demo, right? So let's say that I cut most of this image out, and this is by no means a good cut. This is very rough. Right? Let's say that it's like something like that. So the important thing to note is that this layer is here, and on top of this layer, if I turn off this background layer here, then I will see the checkered, which means transparent. So if I go for my sky, which is in a folder here, and I drag over, let's say, this sky image like that, well, in this case, it's going to come on top, right? So this layer is on top of this layer. So I need to put it behind my image layer so that it appears to be behind like that.
Oh.
So it's really the order of the layers that determine where the background falls.
Alright, sir. I got it. Thanks.
No problem. Alrighty. So we are going to continue our journey with the final segment. And remember, this video is here for you to watch afterwards, so don't worry about missing out. Alright, you can always go back to it if we need to. Alright, and this is a quick reminder to access these videos, you go to the recording section in the website. There we go. You go to recordings, you go to DDM class 2022-23, and under that section you will find part 1, part 2, and part 3. Alright? So that is how you find it. Now, when you do this, you might decide that maybe I don't like this sky, I want to use a different sky. Well, all you have to do is just find back the images of the skies that you have. So in this case, let's try this sky here. Alright, so what do? Well, I just need to drag it into Photoshop. Let's use that method again, and voila. Now, of course, it's behind here because if you look I actually have this layer behind my downtown layer, and I'm going to choose yes to commit that. Alright, great. So now I just need to adjust this sky. I'm going to use this here, and you know, I'm kind of liking this sky. This sky is pretty nice. It's pretty nice. Alright, good. But you can choose any sky that you would like. Now, what we want to do next is we want to put the car in. So we need to go to the folder that has the vehicles. So here we go. Now you can pick any one of these vehicles. I think this one will work best. So I mean, actually any one of these could work, but I'm gonna use let's use the buggy. So again, I'm gonna drag this in. There it is. Of course, it comes behind my downtown layer. I want it to be on top, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna drag it on top. I'm gonna switch it off for now. Let's get a little organized here. I had two skies, so I'm gonna call this sky Sky 2. There we go. So I have Sky 1 and Sky 2. I can actually just swap them out when I'm ready. Alright, that might be something you might like. Alright, let's look on this car that we have here. Now you have to make sure that I'm actually on the car layer, so I'm going to select the car there. Now the first thing is that the car layer it does not have a transparent background. It has this white background, so we need to get rid of it, and we know how to do that already because we remember the lasso tools that we used on the city. Alright, now before we can start manipulating this layer, we know that Photoshop will take this as a smart layer, and we know that we can't edit smart layers, but let's spend some time and talk about that a bit. You know, why would Photoshop, like, when you insert a new object, it would make it into a smart layer and a layer that you can't edit? Well, just to give you a quick example, right? I'm gonna drag in the other vehicle. So let's, for example, I'm gonna drag this other vehicle in like that. There we go. And I'm gonna commit that, and you can see that this now has a new layer. Now if I make this really small, and I know that it's small, if I zoom in, I'm using the control and mouse wheel to zoom in here. That's pretty small, and if you look at it, you say, oh well, it even looks like the quality is kind of lost there because, you know, this one was way sharper. Now of course I can just resize it like that and choose commit, and no problem. Alright, it's now sharp again. Now it's sharp because as a smart object, Photoshop preserves all of the data within this image. Now let's say it was not a smart image, a smart layer. So remember how to convert a layer to a regular layer. You're going to right click it and choose rasterize layer. Alright, great. No difference here. However, if I make this small, once I commit and I say, oops, I don't want it to be small, let me make it large again. It was a bit larger, and I commit. Then you might notice that it's way more blurry, and the reason for that is when you made it small, you totally squashed the pixels. I mean, think about how the pixels work, right? Remember when you zoom in, you can actually eventually see the pixels, right? So let me just kind of zoom out a little bit. Right, so remember when you zoom in, you actually see the pixels here. And what happens when you make something smaller, you are forcing the pixels into a smaller amount of pixel density. So before, when the image was much larger, the pixels that made up the tire, for example, this area, was that amount of pixels. But when you made the image smaller, all of this now has to fit in a smaller size. But guess what? The size of the squares doesn't change. So what does that mean? These squares are going to have to store more information in them, and the squares aren't getting any smaller. So what is essentially happening is you are crushing the image and losing detail, because when you enlarge the image, you would have already lost those that detail in those pixels. Alright, so now that that example is out of the way, let me zoom out a bit. We're going to get rid of this car here, and now we kind of understand why Photoshop uses this smart layer by default, because it doesn't want you to change the size of the image and rotate it and do all sorts of things to it and lose detail. So you have to specifically say, okay, Photoshop, I want to rasterize. Once you do that, you know you have to be very careful, because when you change anything, you're not going to get it back. But in order to change something, in order to cut out an object, you have to rasterize it first before you are able to cut stuff out. Now we're going to try out another tool here. We could use the polygonal lasso tool, our favorite tool, but because of the nature of this car, because it's on a white background, we're going to try another tool. So we're going to try the quick selection tool. Now the quick selection tool is actually a sub tool of the magic one. So remember, once you see this little triangular element here, you're going to click and hold, release, and then you're going to choose the quick selection tool. That's here. Now how does this tool work? Well, the quick selection tool, what I'm going to do is select this white area and drag, and notice I'm clicking and holding and dragging, and the quick selection tool is actually finding all these edges for me automatically, and it's actually going ahead and finding them. So you might say, oh, why didn't we use this tool all along? Look at that, even before I reach the end, it has already selected just the white areas. Now in case it did not select all your white areas, for example, notice that on the top of my car here, I'm going to pan over a little bit by holding the space bar, it has accidentally selected some of the red. So if I delete now, then naturally it's going to actually delete that part of the car, which we don't want. So I'm going to undo that. So what we have to do is deselect this area here. Now to deselect, you're going to hold, and I want to watch to show you this. If I hold Alt, notice that the symbol changes to a minus. If I release Alt, the symbol is a plus. So what you want to do is you want to hold Alt and you want to select the sections that you want to keep. So I'm going to click and hold and drag, and notice that the quick selection is trying to snap to these edges. There we go. I'm going to pan over some more, and I'm going to hold Alt again and add this selection here. So this is another method that you can use to highlight and cut stuff out. You can use the quick selection tool, and in this case it works fine, but if we try to use it on shapes that are a bit random or shapes where the colors are very close, it's not going to work. Alright, so I'm holding Alt and mouse wheel to zoom out. Alright, so let me zoom in a little bit, and oh look, see, you can see that the quick selection would have deleted this section. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to hold Alt and just try to get this in. There we go. Let's get that little part there. I'm going to do the same for the side of the light. I'm going to hold Alt and just kind of brush the edges here, hoping that Photoshop will recognize these edges. Now when you do it first, it might not look like it's snapped, but as soon as you release the mouse button, it will try and find its way. There we go. There we go. Alright. So let me zoom out now. Alright, that should be it. Now, of course, if I hit delete, you can see that it will delete all of these areas here. Now, you could have used the polygonal lasso tool or even the magnetic lasso tool to highlight the areas around it. But I just wanted to show you the quick select tool because that's also a pretty good tool. Alright, I'm going to right click and choose deselect, and I'm going to use my move tool. If you remember, that's that tool right here. And when I use the move tool, I'm able to resize. So I'm going to resize this now. Alright, now while I'm resizing this, I'm gonna position it, and this is where your architectural skills come into play. Let me move this over here. You want to make sure that you get the size right, so you gotta watch your scale, and the angle is a little off here, so I'm going to just a tad. Put this a little over there. There we go. Alright. And now here's the thing. Remember, we made the car smaller. So once we commit now, we have essentially crushed all of those pixels into a smaller space. So once we commit, those pixels that we have crushed are gone. So now would be a time to ensure that, you know, the car is okay. So I'm going to choose okay there. Alright, good to go. Now let's look at some other tools that we have here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the warp tool to kind of fix the perspective a bit. Now if you look closely, you will realize that, well, the car's perspective is kind of going this way, but the road is kind of going that way. So it kind of looks a little bit off, right? And this is where the perspective correction tools come in, which is great for architectural use, right? So to change that perspective tool, now you're gonna go to image. Well, make sure that the car is highlighted because that is the layer that you want to actually warp. So once the car layer is highlighted, you're gonna go to edit. You're gonna go down to transform, and you're gonna go down to warp. And what warp will do, it will change the box around it to these dots, and what you can do is actually drag these dots around. Now you have to kind of guesstimate where they would be in order for the perspective to roll out. And what I'm doing is actually clicking, holding and dragging to get this car looking like it's on the road. There we go. Alright, I'm gonna choose yes to commit. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to do a shadow, and we also want to do some reflections, right? So now the idea of let's do the shadow first. And what we can do to get the shadow, you know, architecturally we know that the shadow would be somewhere in this section.
What's up? I run into a little problem cutting out the sky.
Your voice sounding a bit low.
You can hear me now, sir?
Yeah, man.
I run into a little problem with the sky when I'm cutting it out. I wonder if I can get some help.
What happened with this guy?
I cut out the back layer that's supposed to where the sky goes. So there's like a large white area. I can share my screen and show you a second.
Yeah, man, share your screen. Yeah.
You can see it, sir?
Yeah.
So,
you cut out the sky as well?
Yeah, but I'm not sure how to. I cut out this layer here. I don't know how to fix it, and I don't want to do it over because I did a lot of work.
No problem. All you need to do first, you need to deselect. So let's right click enter the screen and deselect. Good. So now you need to cut out that white area that you have here. Actually, is that so? Scroll down in your layers tab for me. Yeah, it is so. Yeah. So this area that you have here.
Yes, sir.
You need to zoom in and cut that out, and then you should be fine. I mean, you might have to zoom in some more because you're going to have some white.
I don't think I'm able to cut it out. The person delete or something.
Okay. All right. So yep, that should solve you.
No, it's not cutting out, sir.
Oh, if it's not cut, hold on. Turn off that layer. Oh, hold on.
Yeah.
No, wait. Go again. Undo to get back your selection. Control Z. Then make sure you're at right. Oh, but your layer is locked. So you need to unlock your layer by clicking on this little lock symbol that is right here.
Alright, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes, right. Then right there you go.
Thanks, sir.
Okie doke. All right, so let's continue. Here, right? And that would be what a shadow would be like. Now we could actually try and draw in the shadow, but we're going to use some tools that Photoshop has available to us to get the shadows done. Now, what we're going to do, our game plan is that we want to take this car duplicate it. Alright, that's probably a horrible image of the car, but you get the idea. And then we want to color it black. And then place this black image of the car underneath the car so it looks like a shadow. So that's the plan that we want to do. So first thing we need to do is we need to make a copy of this car. Now to do that we need, remember, this is the car layer here, and we need 2 copies of that car layer. Now to do that, what we do is we can right click and then we can choose the option to duplicate layer. Now we want to name this layer car shadow. That's great. Now you might be saying, wait a minute, where is the car? And it's actually directly above the existing car, right? So if I use my move tool, make sure that is highlighted, and I'm on the car shadow layer, when I move, you will see that it has dragged out another car. Now we're going to use a technique called blending options to get this car to be filled black, right? Now to access your blending options on your layer, you're going to right click, you're going to say blending options, and you're going to wait for that window to pop up. Now once that window pops up, we're going to go to color overlay, and we're going to check that checkbox, and notice that once we check that checkbox, the car is actually now filled. We're going to click on it to highlight that color overlay to see the options. And what this layer style actually does is it really just allows you to fill that layer with a color, one flat color. So in this case we want to fill it with black. I'm going to choose OK. Alright, now that's great. Now of course we want this to now act as a shadow, so we need to basically like,
I didn't see how they change the color.
to change the color of the oh, okay. So what you did was we use a blending option, right? So
I'm on the menu for that, but mine is gray.
okay, no problem. Wait, you can share your screen. I'll show you again. We're gonna go to color overlay, and we're gonna check that checkbox, and notice that once we check that checkbox, the car is actually now filled. We're gonna click on it to highlight that color overlay to see the options. And what this layer style actually does is it really just allows you to fill that layer with a color, one flat color. So in this case we want to fill it with
I have it now.
black. I'm going to choose OK. Alright, good stuff. Alright, now that's great. Now of course we want this to now act as a shadow, so we need to basically like squash it all the way down so that it's nice and flat like that. Now to do that, we're going to try out another tool. So we're going to go to edit, and then we're going to go down to let's go down to, we are going to go down to transform, and we're going to go to distort. Right, the last time we went to warp, but this time we're going to go to distort. And what this allows us to do is to grab these edges and actually distort the image in weird, funky ways. So what we want to do is to kind of distort the image like like that, kind of like that, and like that. So now it's starting to look kind of like a car. Well, a bit. Let's carry this way. Let's carry this back. Alright, now of course we need to commit this, so we want to make it look kind of like what we want, and then we're going to commit that. Now remember, once you commit it, you can't change it again, so you want to make sure you do that. And if you're not sure about it, then you want to use your history and you want to go back up one step. Now of course the shadow layer needs to be below the car layer, naturally, because the shadow is below the car. So we're gonna carry that down. Alright, great. So now the shadow is below the car, and next we perhaps want to make this very transparent, because right now it looks a bit too hard. And to do that, we're gonna go to the opacity for the car shadow layer, and we're gonna get the opacity all the way down to there. Okay, now this settings we can always adjust that a little later. Alright, it's coming there, but not quite yet. Next, what we want to do is we want to kind of blur this shadow a little bit. So to do that, we're going to go to filters. Now filters is an interesting element, set of options in Photoshop, and what we're going to do is start to explore what they do. Now filters really manipulate the pixels on screen to do various effects. Now in this case we want to blur the shadow layer, so make sure the shadow layer is highlighted, the car shadow layer, and we're going to go to filter, we're going to go to blur, and we're going to try out, let's try a Gaussian blur. And what that is it's actually using this slider bar here to adjust whatever layer we currently have selected. And what it is doing is that it's making it more blurry, right? So the more we increase this slider bar here, is the more blurry that shadow becomes. Okay, it's almost gone now, so let's carry it back a bit. Yeah, there we go. So it's an overcast day, so we don't have a nice hard shadow, so that is fine. So we're going to choose OK. Alright, so now we have a shadow. So that's without the shadow, and this is with the shadow. So the shadow definitely helps to ground it. Next, we want to have the reflection, and guess what? We're going to use the same approach. We're going to take the car, flip it upside down, and that will be the reflection. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to take the car layer, and we're going to right click and choose duplicate, and we're going to call this reflection. Alright, so again, if I'm on the reflection layer and I drag this out, you will see that it's copied. Now in this case, what we want to do is actually mirror the car upside down, and to do that, all we need to do is to, I call it over squash, but we need to like squash this down. And if you're using the new version of Photoshop, you need to hold shift in order to squash. Hold shift while you are trying to resize, and we're going to go all the way down until we come on the other side, and voila, we have a copy that is flipped. Now the trick with this now is if we put it in position, it's not going to quite fit. So what we need to do, let's commit that change. We need to perhaps use the warp tool. So we're gonna go to edit and transform and go to the warp option. And with that selected, what we want to do is kind of warp this so that only the tires will touch. So that's the tricky part of this. What you want is the tires to touch. There we go. All right, we're gonna commit that, and then of course we're gonna put this reflection layer below the shadow layer. Let's put it below the shadow layer. That's much better. And then we're gonna make the reflection layer, we're gonna let the opacity be lower, just like the shadow layer. So we're gonna adjust that down. There we go. And we want to get it ever so slightly. All right. So basically, this is where we're at now. All right, so we can see the reflection. Now what we want to do just for kicks is that we want to add a little bit of motion blur to the car to let it look like it's driving, you know, really fast, you know. And to do that, we're going to use yet another filter. So what we're going to do is we could add a motion blur to this car. Let's try and see if that works. So we're going to select the car and we're going to go to filter, blur, and we're going to go to, this time we are going to choose motion blur. Now we're going to get presented with options once again, and you can kind of see now that the entire car is blurred, and the blurriness is really controlled by that. And the angle, you can kind of see the car is being blurred at an angle that is controlled here. So what we're going to do is we can try to increase this. Nah, we can also try to change the angle. I mean, this is kind of okay, but what happened is that the entire car is perhaps too blurred, so I'm going to cancel that. What we can do is we're going to use the same trick again. We're going to duplicate the car layer. So to do that, we're going to right click and we're going to choose duplicate, and we're going to call this car blur motion. And yet again, this is another copy, but this time we will add the blur to this layer. So we're gonna add the blur and we're gonna choose motion blur. Now of course this time it's added to this object here, but that's fine because we're not using this. And we can actually just put this object directly over this object. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use a new tool that very popular, but we haven't used it to the current time, which is the eraser tool, which is that tool right there. So we're going to pick the eraser tool, and what we're going to do is, well, remember how this works. So the options for the eraser tools are located up top. Remember, any button you select here, the options for that button is located up top. And what we want to do with this eraser tool here is let the size of the brush be big. So we're going to pick the size and we're going to make that big, even more big, maybe a tad more. Whoa, no, that's too big. Alright, great. Next, we perhaps want to change the flow, which is basically the strength of the eraser. So we're going to empty that all the way down to maybe like 10.
And then what we're gonna do is
Yeah.
Sir, where do I find the opacity for the shadow again?
The opacity for the shadow, you would find that in the opacity for the layer. So what you would need to do is highlight the layer that has the shadow and then adjust the opacity for that layer.
Okay, thank you.
we are gonna erase half of the car. So let's use that eraser tool here, and what we're actually erasing is the car blur layer, and under it is the car layer, so it kind of gives the impression that it's moving. Alright, so when you're all done, this is what your image should look like. So good luck and have fun.
Alright. So that is pretty much our exercise for today. What I need you guys to do is you're going to complete this exercise. You're going to submit it. The submission button is on the handout, and then I'll mark it, and then next week, usually by next class, you should have that grade, and then we move on to the next exercise. All right, guys.
Okay, sir.
All right. So we didn't do bad. It's now 7. And it's like minutes to 7 now, and this class finishes at 7. All right. Well, we didn't do so bad, right? But on average, some of the exercises might be a bit shorter, so might finish quicker sometimes. You know. So next week we have another Photoshop tutorial, and this one will be more linked to architecture. And then we'll talk a little bit about image size. That's going to be a very great lecture. That's going to be on Monday. So I'll see you guys again on Monday. All right?
Hi, sir. Before you go, can you tell me where to find the recording another time? Because where I see class recordings, telling me to sign up. I don't understand.
You have to sign up, yes. Because you have to sign in as a user. So just sign up using your Google or something so that you can have access to the forum. All right?
Okay, sir.
Sir, how do we save this? What do we save this as?
Well, you're gonna save this as, you're gonna save it for yourself as a PSD, but all I need is a JPEG file to mark. So that's what you're going to submit. The submission button is on the form itself. I remember that the form is the handout, which is on the website. All right?
Okay, sir, thank you.
All right. Well, that is it for today's class. I'll see you guys again next week. Till then, take care.
Thanks.
Take care.